Hey guys, here we are in the AFE Training Center. We have a lovely patient in the chair today getting her first ever lifting threads. So we're starting by just numbing her up. You can see here that the patient has been marked up. We just use a dry erase marker to do so and cleaned off really well prior to the procedure. We like to use like a HIBA cleanse, anything to kind of really clean the skin, of course, taking the makeup off beforehand, and then using just some alcohol to make sure that she is nice and clean. Once I clean her off, I mark her up, and I always mark her up sitting up so that I can see how that tissue really kind of hangs when when she's not laying back. When we're laying back, it always looks a bit better, but it doesn't look that way when we stand up. Here you can see I am creating my pilot hole. I did numb with just a little bit of lidocaine with epi right at that pilot hole, and you can see she's bleeding a little bit. No big deal. We are just going to get this cannula in. So I am using a ComfortTox cannula. It's 22 gauge by 75 millimeter, and I am just going in and creating my track. I'm kind of using my non-dominant hand to get that tissue over the cannula, and I do have to break through a couple ligaments. This is a blunt tip cannula, so it's not sharp on the end. At this point, she only has numbing on board at the pilot hole. So once I get to that distal end, I'm going past the deficit. So in this case, I'm going past that nasolabial fold, crease, and I am retrograde injecting lidocaine. So you can see here, I pushed a little bit of lidocaine on my way out to get that track nice and numb. I don't like to use more than about half a cc of lidocaine per track, and the reason is patients don't need that much lidocaine on board to actually be comfortable. And also, if you oversaturate that tissue with fluid, then the barbs on the lifting threads are not going to engage as well. So you can see here, I'm constantly checking where my tip is. I'm constantly checking my depth. I don't really like kind of where we're going here. You can see here the patient kind of is saying that she feels the cannula inside her mouth. I think she just was feeling the sensation, and that's why she kind of keeps opening her mouth. This is a good friend of mine, so she was being a little bit silly throughout this procedure. So you can see she's talking a lot. Lots of patients tend to talk kind of a lot when they're nervous, as we all know. So that's kind of what she was doing. She was being silly at this point. I finally got to a depth that I was comfortable with, had her close her mouth, and retrograded that lidocaine throughout the entire check. You can see here there's a little bit of an X down at her mandible, and that is where her antegonial notch is. So I marked that because that's our no-fly zone. Out of that antegonial notch comes the facial artery, and we do not want to hit that. If we did, of course, we're not occluding that vessel like we could with, filler, but we would have a pretty significant hematoma, which is why I have that marked, and that's considered my no-fly zone. You can see here I'm giving the cannula a little bit of a twist. I'm using pressure, kind of using all these different techniques to get into the correct plane. I didn't love my depth down there. Sometimes it's easy to get a little bit too deep or too superficial once you get down into the jowl. So I'm just, kind of advancing and redirecting. I like that, so I'm going to retrograde inject lidocaine. Again, this bleeding at the pilot hole is completely normal. You can see here we have a headband on. I added the headband because we do not want to be passing these cannulas over the hair if possible. Because the hair can be dirty. Of course, this patient's hair is, relatively clean, but this headband kind of keeps the hair out of the way and then also provides a relatively clean field. If our cannula grazes it, it's okay. This is not a sterile procedure. It becomes a sterile procedure when you start tying threads, which I am not going to do. You can see here, I put that first thread in, easy as that. So that thread is cannulated through this cannula. These are VSoft Arctate 1 threads. They're 18 gauge by 100 millimeters. So the 18 is the gauge, and then they're 100 millimeters long. They come in all different gauges and sizes. That's just kind of what I chose for this patient based on the thickness of her skin, the tissue that I felt we needed to lift. I thought a 19 maybe wouldn't give her as much lift as I wanted, but a 17 was going to be too thick. Here you can see I'm having a little bit of difficulty getting through, and it's because that cannula wants to kind of slip back into the previous track. So I got where I wanted to go, and then put a little bit of pressure down at the distal end of that track and pulled the cannula straight out. The thread stays in, cannula comes out. You can see that little white pledget. that just kind of follows its way back as you advance. So that's what keeps the thread in the cannula. And then once you get to kind of the point you want to be at, you essentially just accentuate that lift, give a little bit of pressure down at that distal end so that the thread can engage, and you come straight out. Cannula comes out, thread stays in. So you can see here I have all 3 threads in, and it didn't take long at all. And I'm moving on to this jawline vector. So I did nasolabial fold, marionette lines, and then jowl, and then I'm going to do jawline. So you can see here I created my pilot hole, and then I am going in and giving a little bit of numbing. So going in with my cannula. This tends to be the most uncomfortable site following for most patients, and that's because you're right above the masseter in most cases, and it can be, a little uncomfortable for them. It also can become quite pinchy once you get towards the corner of the mouth, and that is because we're kind of near the mental foramen, and there's lots of nerves, and so it can kind of, tickle a nerve and cause a unpleasant sensation. You can see here, patient's kind of a little uncomfy here, but we are already getting towards the end. I'm just kind of getting into my correct plane. With these cannulas and these threads, you cannot back up. Once you back up, that thread is going to engage. So what I'm doing here as a little, technique is I am locking that thread in with my finger up at the top, which enables me to reverse if I need to. But for the most part, you cannot reverse. So you need to ensure that you are in the correct plane and you like the plane you're in. Here I'm just giving a little bit of tightening. You can see that skin kind of accordions. I don't like to do too much, but a little bit just to really get a nice lift. And you can see here how that jawline line that I had drawn is already kind of now looks like a hill, and that's how much lift we just got. I'm using suture scissors, ensuring that I am cutting really, really short because we want that thread to slip underneath the tissue. Otherwise, it will continue to migrate out, and we really don't want that. So you can see here I'm trimming. All 4 have been trimmed, and now I'm putting some arnica gel just to kind of smooth this. You can see I'm going to apply some pressure and engage those threads. It feels like a little bit of a popping sensation when you engage those threads, and they are multi-directional, so you can go both ways. You don't only have to massage upwards. I'm just kind of trying to get that tissue to relax. If the patient has any puckering or anything like that, then it will settle. No need to be worried about that. Something we see sometimes is some thread visibility. That is a little bit more difficult to handle, but I don't think we're going to have any of that issue with this patient. I'm just going in and kind of smoothing out what I see, and we will be moving on to the other side. I'm just working out a couple of those little puckers here. Then I'm going to clean those 2 sites with alcohol and put on Band-Aids. Patient should leave those Band-Aids on. Of course, we don't want any makeup right away. We want everything to stay really, really nice and clean. And you can see here, that is what I'm doing. So thanks for stopping by. We got some really nice results with this. You can see here, that is the before, and then we will see the after. So kind of hard to tell. You can see she's swollen, but she is looking great. Thanks for stopping by.